I was 8 when I split a stool in half trying to drive 3-inch nails into pallet wood. Dad stood in the garage doorway, arms crossed, and looked at it like I'd dropped $1,000 in a campfire. You don't drive railroad spikes into pine, Mason. That's waste, not work. Then he walked back inside without another word. I stayed kneeling by the wreck for a second, pretending I could fix it, but my hands were already shaking. My name's Mason. I'm 30 now, but this started back in Pittsburgh. North Side, brick duplex, bitter cold in winter. You could hear the city buses huff around the corner every morning. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. Dad, Raymond, worked risk management at a regional bank. Buttoned shirts, quiet dinners, and a face that didn't change even when you got something right. He liked predictable outcomes. That's how he talked. Mom, Denise, was a full-time mirror to the neighborhood. Cars waxed. Curtains perfect. She once returned a casserole dish because it had a scratch. Evan, my brother, was 3 years older, taller, louder, cleaner, the kind of kid who could walk into a room and have someone asking if he was student body president. He liked real estate shows and said, leverage, like it was a prayer. Me? I was the one drawing table legs in the margins of my spelling worksheets. I used to sneak into the basement to mess with scraps from old shipping crates and try to build things. I had a spiral notebook I filled with joints and measurements, taped in catalog pictures of end tables and bookshelves, wrote down prices with dollar signs like they were dreams. Evan got certificates framed and lined down the hallway like trophies. I had a crooked shelf in my room that leaned like it was drunk, and I told people it was modern style. Dinner was always the same. Dad and Evan talking stock tickers, Mom asking about GPAS. I'd just sit there, running my thumb across the edge of the table, counting knots in the wood. One Saturday I made a little breadboard for Mom, glued and clamped it nice, sanded smooth, finished with mineral oil. She looked at it, nodded once, and said, "Cute. Did you study for the PSAT yet?" That was the rhythm. Every project was followed by a reminder, every effort measured in scores or salaries. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I just felt something settle inside when I was sanding, like I was doing something that mattered. But upstairs it didn't count unless it got printed on a transcript. At some point, I stopped showing them what I made. Just brought it to my room, placed it on that leaning shelf, and went right back down to the basement for more. That attic room above the barbershop in Etna, it was barely wider than a twin mattress, and the window whistled when the wind blew. But I could hang my jeans from the ceiling pipe, stack my tools under the bed, and not have anyone ask me if I'd filled out FAFSA. I felt like I'd stolen back my own breath. I worked mornings at Ridgeway Lumber. The boss was a guy named Gary, with a limp and a clock-in policy that didn't bend. I stacked MDF until my shoulders burned and learned quick how to slide a 4x8 sheet solo without chipping a corner. The truck drivers respected you if you could move fast and didn't complain. I stayed quiet and hustled. At night, I swept floors and emptied scrap bins at North Fork Joinery. Vince, the owner, didn't talk much, but he had hands like tree roots and moved like every inch of wood deserved respect. The first time I watched him cut a tenon, I stopped what I was doing mid-sweep. He glanced up and said, "You can watch, just don't talk." That was the deal, and I took it. I studied how he sorted boards by grain and cupping, how he paused before every pass through the joiner. No wasted motion, no guesswork. He made it look like muscle memory and chess at the same time. Back at Ridgeway, I started learning which fasteners split poplar and which held in cherry without bubbling the surface. I'd stand at the hardware aisle during slow hours, reading the back of screw boxes like they were textbooks. I wasn't daydreaming, I was studying. Mom called twice a month, same tone every time, half worried, half insulted. "Have you at least thought about enrolling somewhere?" she'd ask. "Evan's already got his foot in the door. You're out there, sanding things?" I'd just say, "I'm good, Mom," and shift the phone to the other ear while I kept working. Arguing didn't do anything. She didn't hear words that didn't come with a diploma behind them. I saved up $62 to buy a router off a guy in Sharpsburg who smelled like paint thinner and stale beer. When I plugged it in, it kicked sideways and almost took my wrist with it. I spent the next 3 weekends making ugly picture frames and teaching myself not to be scared of the noise. I cut one frame too small, the next too big, the third one almost right. The corners didn't line up flush, but I figured out what outfeed support really meant after chasing a board across the shop floor. That notebook I kept, still the same one from when I was a kid, stayed by my bed. It had dog-eared pages full of clumsy sketches, price lists I stole from catalogs, and half-finished designs. It looked like trash to anyone else. To me, it was a map. Not out of something. Into it. Vince caught me staring at his dovetail jig one night. Without looking up, he said, "Next week, I'll show you how not to mess it up." By 19, I had the morning shift at Ridgeway, a name tag that said Mason, and a back that cracked every time I bent wrong. I knew which screws to use for cedar, which stains bled through primer, and how to smile just enough for the regulars without looking desperate. If you wanted advice on deck boards, I had opinions. I'd just finished sanding a coffee table I made from some old floor joists Vince gave me. Took a photo of it, showed it to him before my shift. He stared at it for a few seconds and said, "The proportions are honest." That was all. But coming from him, it landed deeper than a trophy ever could. That Friday afternoon, I was down in aisle 12, resetting a clamp display. Bending, lifting, pulling stock, just zoning out, trying to finish before close. That's when I saw them, my parents, Evan, and a woman I didn't recognize at first. Long brown hair, shiny like it was freshly blown out. Laurel, his fiancée. They didn't walk in, they floated like they were checking comps on a listing. I didn't have time to duck behind the lumber. Dad spotted me first. His eyes narrowed, then that same dry smirk came out like he'd won something. Well, he said. "Still here?" Mom followed with, "Is this full time now?" Her tone landed like I'd just admitted to panhandling. Evan, in a sport coat like he'd come straight from closing a deal, clapped me on the shoulder. "At least you're learning customer service," he said, loud enough for the next aisle to hear. Laurel smiled, polite and trying. "How long have you been helping out here?" Before I could answer, Evan cut in. "Mason's got the screw aisle on lock, knows 'em all by weight." Then he laughed like it was original, like I hadn't heard variations of that same joke since I was 10. I didn't flinch, just walked them up to the register, scanned a box of cabinet pulls and a tub of joint compound. My hands were steady, but my ears burned. They didn't buy much, probably didn't need anything. On their way out, Dad paused and looked around like the place was beneath him. Then he said, "Son, you can't build a life with discount lumber." Mom giggled. That little perfect snort laugh she saved for dinner parties and neighbor gossip. I said nothing, didn't give them the win, just bagged their stuff and nodded once. They walked out like they'd dropped off a donation. When my shift ended, I sat on the loading dock behind the store and watched the river drift by. Bits of trash floated past like reminders. I lit a smoke I didn't want, stared down at my boots, and told myself the truth. It's on you, Mason. Keep it the work. The next morning, I opened the shop with Vince. He was wiping down the bandsaw when he asked, "Who were those overdressed real estate agents yesterday?" "People I used to live with," I said. That's all he got. That's all he needed. He tossed me a key like it wasn't a big deal. "Come in Sundays. Use the saw. Don't lose a finger." I caught it one-handed. Felt like someone had opened a real window in a sealed room. Sunday mornings, I beat the sunrise to the shop. Lights humming overhead. Coffee cold before the first sip. No customers, no clocks, just me, my hands, and the chisel. I practiced mortises until my grip relaxed and the blade moved like it already knew what to do. Vince would pop in around 9, sometimes earlier. He'd nod if I wasn't screwing it up too bad. One weekend I built a walnut end table with a floating top and tapered legs, clean and tight, the kind of piece that made me double-check the level even though I already knew it was square. I stuck it in the front window on Vince's suggestion. He told me, "Price it fair, but don't lowball yourself to feel safe." I wrote $280 on the tag, then erased it and wrote it again, trying to not feel ridiculous. A week later, a woman with paint on her sleeves walked in and bought it without blinking, said she was a photographer, and the piece looked calm. That one word knocked around in my chest all night. I stayed late and roughed out 2 more designs on scrap paper taped to the bench. That same week, Vince slid a flyer across the bench. Allegheny School of Craft. Scholarship covers tuition if you get in. You just gotta survive the portfolio review. I didn't have much, a few clean boxes, that one walnut table photo, and a stool that wobbled if you leaned back too far. Vince looked through it all and said, "Take the notebook. You've been building longer than you think." 2 weeks later, I was sitting across from a panel of 3 people wearing glasses on chains and cardigans dusted with sawdust. My palms left the marks on the folder. I talked fast. About why a good drawer slide is like a handshake. About patience. About how you can't fake square, not for long. One of them smiled when I said, I like when the fit is tight enough to make a sound. They didn't say much. I walked out sweating like I just hauled lumber. The letter came 2 weeks later, folded neat and creased like it mattered. I got in, full scholarship. Small stipend, $375 a month, as long as I showed up and stayed on track. I let myself cry once, in the attic room. Then I bought a used block plane and 2 chisels that didn't come in a bargain bin. Treated them like jewelry. The school was serious. No hand-holding. Instructors tested your joints with mallets. One guy smashed a student's box apart and said, next time, cut deeper. Nobody blinked. I learned veneers, compound curves, vacuum bagging. Built chairs, boxes, even a writing desk. Got my fingers caught in a bending form once and walked it off like an idiot. The business class hit harder than the tools. Lead times, deposits, scope creep. How to set prices so you didn't build yourself into a corner. I hated it at first. Then I realized it was the only way to make what I loved not kill me. A year later, I had a certificate, a better eye, and a binder full of sketches that didn't feel like fantasy anymore. The day after graduation, I walked back into North Fork, hung up my coat, and asked Vince if the table spot in the front window was still mine. He just said, make it worth the glass. So I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. The garage bay I rented was wedged behind a tire shop on Main, 2 blocks from the river. Rent was $340 a month, cash only. The concrete floor had oil stains older than me, and the roll-up door screamed like it was in pain every time I pulled it open. But it was mine. I called the company Iron and Elm. The name stuck in my throat the first time I said it out loud. Strong and warm, solid and clean. I carved the logo into a scrap block and used it like a brand, smacking it into wood with a dead blow mallet. It wasn't fancy, but it felt real. First jobs came through word of mouth. Friends of friends, people from Ridgeway, a waitress who needed shelves for her new apartment. Entry benches, bookcases, a headboard that almost snapped my dolly trying to get it up a stairwell. I took deposits in a coffee can and tracked hours on the back of off-cut plywood. At first, I kept apologizing for the prices. I'd mumble numbers like they were guesses. One day, a guy raised an eyebrow and said, "Is that firm or charity?" That shut me up quick. From then on, it was half down, half on delivery, no exceptions. A little cafe down the street let me hang a live-edge slab for their front counter. The owner said she didn't have full cash, but she could pay part and cover the rest in breakfasts. I ate more eggs in that winter than I had in the last 5 years. Still called it a win. Then a neighborhood paper ran a piece. Young maker keeps it honest. Nothing big, black and white, 3rd page in. But I got 8 inquiries in 4 days. People were tired of flat-pack junk that peeled after a year. I had something they couldn't click to buy. I hired Blaine not long after that. He was 19, quiet, and could square a cabinet box with a glance. Didn't talk unless something was crooked. First time I saw him flush a drawer front without a jig, I knew he wasn't going anywhere. Best decision I made that winter. After we landed a lobby job for a boutique hotel near the Strip District, we needed space. The Lawrenceville lease was 1,600 square feet, big windows, freight access. First month's rent hurt, but we had work. The hotel designer sent specs with words like heirloom feel and authentic tone. We built 6 pieces that almost broke us. I took out a loan, $38,000, to upgrade the dust collection and buy a proper sliding table saw. The bank manager kept tapping his pen like he expected me to bail halfway through. I signed anyway, circled the first repayment date on the shop calendar in Sharpie, and underlined it twice. We delivered on time. The designer hugged me and said, "It feels like these were always meant to be here." I took that line and stenciled it onto the wall above the clamp rack. We used the lobby photos in every pitch deck after that. Clients started calling us. Incursi's magazine did a short write-up about local makers. That pulled in a few leads. A month later, a regional lifestyle magazine ran 6 pages on Iron and Elm. I stood in a corner and pretended not to watch customers reading it in the waiting area. We made money, reinvested, then made a little more. I paid off the loan in 11 months. Bought a storefront for a showroom. Small, tight, but enough. Now when people came in and ran their hands over a tabletop, I didn't think about what my dad said in aisle 12. I thought about finish cure time and whether I was behind on lead times, and if the surface felt warm. 2 years after I opened the showroom, I got a text from Mom. Short, stiff, like a memo. Evan's wedding is May 14th. Be there. Family. That was it. No, hi, no, hope you're well. Just an obligation with a date stamped on it. The place was a high-end hotel downtown, the kind that tries too hard to look timeless. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like upside-down trees, all glass and gold. I wore my best suit, the one from the magazine shoot, and still felt like a contractor who wandered into the wrong ballroom. Evan looked like a politician. Perfect suit, perfect hair, perfect smile. Laurel stood beside him in something lacy and stiff, like a cover photo come to life. Dad was working the room like he was pitching stocks. Mom floated around like she ran the place. She wore blue and held her wine like a prop. I tried to disappear into a back table, kept my head down, and picked at a salad that tasted like leaves. But Mom found me, of course. She smiled with her teeth, grabbed my arm like I was a seat assignment gone wrong, and marched me up to the family table. Dad raised his glass and said, too loud, "Still doing the wood thing, son?" Someone laughed, one of Evan's brokerage buddies, I think. I swallowed it and nodded. Evan leaned in and said, "Glad to see you've graduated from 2x4s. What's next, popsicle sticks?" His voice had that rehearsed ring, like he practiced it on the drive over. I kept it simple. Shop manager, custom work, a team of 2. Short answers. The less I gave, the less they could spin. Let them fill in the gaps. Dinner crawled, speeches came next. Evan's friends got up and toasted their glory days at Penn State, slurring through investment jokes and stories about rooftops. Then Evan took the mic. His grin widened when he looked my way. "We've got my little brother here tonight," he said. "The man behind the power tools. Come on up, Mason. Say a few words." It wasn't an ask, it was a trap, and everyone knew it. I took the mic, held it low. "Congratulations to Evan and Laurel," I said. "I hope your house holds up like a good joint. Strong under pressure, no gaps, no wiggle." A couple folks chuckled. Not unkindly, I nodded and stepped back, ready to sit. That's when it happened. A voice from the head table called out, "Hold up! Is that Iron and Elm?" I turned. It was Richard Larkin, a developer I'd met once when his assistant picked up a custom conference table. He held up his phone with an article from Steel City Business, pulled up. My face, my logo, my shop. The energy in the room shifted. Screens came out. People whispered. Someone said, "That's the custom shop on Penn." A few guests looked at me like I'd just walked out of the TV. Then Laurel's father stood up. Big guy. Logistics company with a name on the side of trucks all over the state. He reached out and shook my hand. "That hotel lobby downtown," he said. "You built that?" "I did," I said, steady as I could. He nodded slow. "It's good work, real good. Didn't know it was you." Evan didn't speak, just sat there with his glass halfway to his lips, frozen like a paused frame. Dad stared down at the tablecloth like it held stock data. Mom blinked fast, then smiled and said, "Well, we've always believed in Mason's craft." I didn't roll my eyes, didn't flex. I just smiled, shook hands with Laurel's father again, and said, "I learned a lot selling clamps." That one landed. A few people laughed because they got it. The rest didn't need to. After the wedding, Mom started calling more. Not often, but enough to notice. The sharp edge in her voice was gone. She sounded careful, like she was walking through a room with broken glass on the floor and didn't want to be the first to bleed. Dad didn't call at all, but one of my cousins told me he'd mentioned my little shop to Aunt Colleen and said I was doing national orders now. I almost laughed. National orders, like I was shipping pallets of plywood to Nebraska, but it was something. Evan showed up on a Wednesday, 3:10 in the afternoon. I remember because I was in the middle of fitting drawer slides and the door chime startled me. He walked in wearing a suit that needed pressing and a grin that didn't quite attach to his eyes. "Mason," he said, opening his arms like we hadn't seen each other since grade school. "This place looks sharp." I grabbed a glass, filled it with water, and handed it to him. I stayed standing. The habit of shrinking when he entered a room, gone. Died somewhere between my first order and my last invoice. He walked slow around the showroom, touching the edge of a bench, looking at a walnut sideboard like he could price it. Then he got to the point. "I've got this condo project," he said. "Downtown, high-end finishes. Timeline's tight, but the upside's serious." I waited. "I need a partner to bridge a little funding gap," he added, like he was asking for a ride, not a loan. "How much?" I asked, even though I already knew I wasn't in. He cleared his throat. "420,000, but the return is sweet. Easily doubled inside a year." I almost laughed. "Evan, I make tables, I cover payroll, I don't float condo deals." He held up a hand. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking as your brother." I didn't smile. I didn't crack. I just looked at him and said, "You stood in a room full of people and made jokes about me selling 2x4s. You remember that?" He looked down, quiet, not ashamed, just trying to rewind, trying to place the scene and the words and how they might have landed. "People change," he said. "They do," I agreed. "But books still close on balance." He tried once more, a little softer. "This is a real shot. 1 year and we're both ahead." I shook my head. "I already took my shot." He exhaled hard and stepped forward like he might say something else, then stopped. Instead, he leaned in and pulled me into a hug. His arms closed around me, but mine didn't move. I let him hold air. He pulled back, fixed his sleeves, and said, "Well, good seeing you." "Yeah," I said. "You too." He left through the front, the bell ringing behind him like punctuation. I watched him cross the street, tap his phone, and disappear into a silver car. Blaine walked out from the back, wiping his hands on a rag. Was that somebody from that hotel job? I looked at the drawer we'd been fitting before the interruption and picked up the square. "Nope," I said, not quoting anything. We went back to work. The market tipped hard the year I turned 25. Design firms stopped calling about statement pieces and started asking if I could shrink orders or use cheaper finishes. I said no more often than yes, but I kept the doors open. Evan's name started showing up in places he didn't want to be. Local news blurbs, real estate boards, even a Reddit thread someone emailed me. Delayed builds, lenders walking off, rumors about unpaid contractors. I kept my mouth shut and my sander running. Then one morning, the phone buzzed at 8:07, Mom's number. I picked up without thinking, half expecting it to be another invite or some clipped comment about the showroom paint. Instead, her voice came through shaky, like it belonged to somebody else entirely. "It's Evan," she said. "The banks are calling in the notes. The house. They might take the house." My stomach sank like I'd swallowed a brick. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Just us." I met her at a diner by the river, the kind with cracked booths and waitresses who still call you hon. She looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen her. No earrings, no foundation, just worry. Her hands stayed wrapped around a mug of tea she didn't drink. "We didn't know it was this bad," she said. "Your father, he trusted Evan had a plan. I know how this looks, but if you could help, just this once." She didn't finish the sentence, just left it hanging between us like steam off the coffee. I stirred mine, cold and bitter. My brain did the math. What I had tied up in payroll, materials, rent on 2 spaces. I thought about all the years I was the punchline at our own kitchen table. "I can't cover a sinking portfolio," I said, "but I can give you the name of a good lawyer, someone who can walk you through asset sales, might buy you some time." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't fall apart. Just nodded and looked down at her hands like they weren't hers anymore. I paid the bill, walked her to the car, and waited until she pulled away before I went back to work. A week later, the whole trio showed up at the shop. It was 3:02 in the afternoon. Blaine had just finished rough-cutting stock for a custom bar build when I saw them through the front window. Evan, Dad, and Mom, standing side by side like they'd rehearsed it. They sat down where clients usually sit. Dad's shoulders looked smaller, like someone had let the air out. Evan's knee bounced non-stop. Mom held her purse tight on her lap, like it might escape. "We're asking for help," Dad said. "We didn't come to argue." Evan leaned forward. "Just a bridge, Mason. We're not asking you to throw money away." "I told Mom already," I said. "No loans, no cosigns, no guarantees. I've worked too hard to go under with you." Evan's jaw clenched. "We're brothers." I held his stare. "Yeah, and being brothers doesn't make me a bailout." They looked at each other like someone had promised this would go differently. Nobody argued, nobody yelled. They just stood, quietly, and left through the front. I picked up my chisel, lined up the next mortise, and put steel to wood like I always did. Word spread fast. Evan filed for bankruptcy 2 weeks after that last visit. Laurel packed up and left within a month. No statement, no drama, just gone. The same friends who used to crowd his rooftop with cocktails and Bluetooth speakers stopped answering his calls. Silence is loud when you're on the wrong side of it. My parents left the house in Brighton Heights and moved to a one-bedroom in Reserve Township. Mom texted me a photo of a white plastic folding table with 2 mismatched chairs and said, "Our new dining set, compact and efficient." I didn't answer right away. When I did, I sent the contact info for a church pantry that treated people with respect and a moving crew that didn't overcharge. No speech, just tools, like always. Meanwhile, Iron and Elm kept pushing forward. The big flashy orders dried up, but the small jobs didn't. We got smarter, tighter bids, clearer timelines, no overpromises. The quotes went out clean and honest, and people kept calling back. Blaine started packing his own lunch and staying late when he didn't have to. He never said a word about it, and I didn't make it a moment. He just worked like the shop meant something to him. We opened a second showroom in Cleveland. The rent was sane, the neighborhood had good foot traffic, and I had enough left from the last quarter to cover 6 stage pieces and a month of utilities. I drove up on weekends to sweep the floor, talk to walk-ins, and fix the lighting. Nothing fancy, just presence. Saturday mornings, I started teaching free woodworking basics to local teens. Nothing complicated. I showed them how to double-check a measurement before a cut, how to sand properly, and why your thumb should never be near a spinning blade. Some kids got bored and didn't come back. The ones who stayed, they were sharp. They asked questions I used to be afraid to ask out loud. One of those Saturdays, a local TV producer came in to shoot some B-roll and ended up putting me on a morning segment. They handed me a mic and asked if I could build something simple in under 10 minutes. I knocked together a flat-pack stool in 6 and spent the rest of the time talking about apprenticeships, not success, not hustle. Just steady hands and clear plans. The next day, Mom called. Her voice was soft but not shaky. "I saw you on TV," she said. "You look confident." I was nervous, I told her. "Well, I'm proud," she said. First time she'd said that out loud. I didn't know what to do with it, so I just said thanks and let it hang there. A week later, Evan texted, "I'm trying to get straight, one step at a time." I stared at the message for a while before replying. "I hope you do." And I meant it. That night, after Blaine left, I swept the floor like I always did. It's not just about keeping the place clean, it's how I slow down. It's how I check my own work without needing a checklist. It's how I remind myself the shop still stands. And so do I. The flight to New York landed just after sunrise. I had one carry-on, my same dark suit from Evan's wedding, and boots I'd scrubbed until they shined like fresh lacquer. A car met me outside the terminal. That part felt ridiculous. The studio had white walls, sharp lights, and coffee that burned hotter than needed. They pinned a mic to my lapel and told me to speak like I meant it. I didn't know any other way. The host opened with grit, asked about the work, the long days, the story behind the name. I stayed in my lane, talked about custom builds, timelines, what it meant to make something that doesn't fall apart in 5 years. Then she asked about family, not shop crew, not mentors, blood family. Even under those bright lights, that one landed deep. I kept my voice level, told her respect meant more than job titles, said I learned to stand when no one clapped and to keep building anyway. I saw the producer off to the side lower her phone and nod once. That was enough. I didn't list every comment I ever swallowed or name every time I ate silence at dinner while my brother got applause. I didn't need to. The people who knew, knew. I said, building a table that holds for years is a kind of promise, that I try to live like that. I saw heads nod across the studio. A sound guy mouthed nice as I stood to leave. After the segment aired, the messages came in fast. Mostly guys, some 17, some 50. Said they'd felt the same, unseen, ignored, boxed in. I replied to what I could, sent links to schools, shop names, tool guides. Didn't promise magic, just gave them places to start. On the flight home, I thought about my dad's smirk in aisle 12, Evan's shoulder slap at the wedding, Mom's softer tone after years of corners and judgment. None of it burned anymore. I landed in Pittsburgh late, got to the shop just past midnight. Blaine was long gone, but the clamps were set and the radio still low. The air smelled like finish and pine dust. I walked to the new dining table we were about to deliver and ran my hand over the edge. I felt the ridges fade under my palm. Clean lines, tight joints, honest weight. If there's any justice in my story, it's not revenge. It's this: I stayed myself and held the line. They learned I wasn't a backup plan, and I learned I didn't need a pat on the head to get moving. I don't know what they say about me now. I don't check. I've got orders, a crew, and a door I open every morning at 8. Looking back, I should have known. Sometimes the best payback is a clean shop, paid invoices, and a name that holds its own weight. One last thing before we close: when someone who dismissed you comes asking for help, where do you set the line between compassion and self-respect? Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Even something as simple as "great story" means a lot to me.